Welcome, everyone. This is a meeting of the West Palm Beach City Commission. It's a work session, and it is June 25th. It's about 2 minutes after 10 in the morning. We're going to start out with item number 1, Vulnerability and Resilience Assessment Presentation. Penny, do you want to cue us up on this?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm really happy to be here and excited to be here this morning to share with you a project that is going to help make West Palm Beach have a more resilient future. And you know, if I'm here, it's probably talking about climate change. So I want to just lay the groundwork a minute about types of things that we do with addressing climate change. So there's really two big categories. There's mitigation and adaptation. And mitigation is when we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions, tracking it, reducing it, and the kinds of activities that we can do. So, increasing your energy efficiency,
LED lights,
different kinds of alternative fuels, solar, converting our fleet to electric, and even our tree canopy improvements, as those help sequester some of the greenhouse gases. So that's the mitigation part. And then there's adaptation. So adaptation is really looking at how can we prepare for the future, the changes that we're anticipating with climate change, and make our plans different, and if it means building things differently or looking at things differently. And that's what we're going to be talking about more today. So adaptation would be thinking about things like we're going to have stronger storms. There may be more periods of real dry, so there may be droughts. It may be when it rains, we're getting tons of rain like we've seen recently all at once. It could be sea level rise, although we're certainly better positioned than our sister cities to the south, but certainly that's what we need to prepare for as well. It could be heat. What's the productivity that we're going to expect out of people that work when the temperatures are up in the 90s all the time, or not all the time, but more. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at, and how do we plan for that? How do we know what our assets are so that we can see which of those are more vulnerable than others? So we are working right now on a resilience assessment that is looking at those assets, looking at those threats, and then helping us identify them and then prepare for them. We are part of what this does as well is help us meet one of the commitments we've made to the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And what they want us to do is they want us to identify our greenhouse gas emissions, track them, be transparent about it, develop a climate action plan, and then act on that plan. Well, we've had a sustainability action plan for a while. We're in the process of updating it. We're rolling in our STAR communities target objectives. We're looking at all those other commitments that we've made, and we're also working with the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact, their climate action plan, to address that and pull it all together into one plan. But what this resilience assessment that we're going to be talking about today does, it makes it granular. It's all about West Palm Beach, and then how we can use that to make better choices in the future.
Penny, can you just take a minute to talk about the STAR rating for the new commissioners, so we can make sure they understand what that is?
Love to. So STAR Communities is a nonprofit that has been around for about 4 years right now, and it looks across the board at 7 areas within resilience and sustainability. It rates communities on a very prescribed set of criteria. We went through about a year long of assessment, and we were very happy to have a 4-star rating. There are only 3 ratings, 3-star, 4-star, and 5-star. We're the only 4-star city in the state of Florida, and we are working for that 5-star. And that's why we're trying to, really look at this assessment as a baseline and then see where we need to go to the future.
And the other thing you'll note when we do our strategic planning, if you look at the strategic plan, the 7 areas in the strategic plan are the 7 areas from the star rating system. So we incorporated it throughout all of our departments because we know it's important that we're financially resilient. All of our water supply is resilient. So it goes across all departments.
Yes. So this is really just helping us with those greater goals and achievements that we're working for, which is to keep our city the wonderful place it is to work, live, and visit. So with that, I'd like to introduce Jim Fox. He is with NEMAC. NEMAC, and I hope I get this right, is the National Environmental Modeling and Analysis Center. That is at UNC Asheville, and he is also working with another partner, Fernleaf Interactive, which he'll tell you more about. Jim?
Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you. And please feel free to stop me at any time. I want to make sure I answer your questions here during this briefing as well, too. You'll see the partnership between NEMAC and Fernleaf is representative of what's called a public-private partnership. I'm sure you've heard a lot about those as the nation is moving ahead to be looking at some of these challenges, to be moving this sort of information out of science and research into the commercial space. And that's exactly what you're seeing sitting through here is Fernleaf is the commercial partner. I run the Applied Research Center. And so hopefully also you're familiar nationwide with the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. This was launched during the previous administration, and the White House approached our group through NOAA to put together the Resilience Toolkit for them. And you can see then that when you start looking at an approach like this, the idea was for any municipality, any jurisdiction of any size in the nation to be able to make their start to understand what the issues were, what they were facing, and how to build resilience. And so we're the group that's put that together. We also maintain that. If you actually go onto this now, you'll actually see that this is moving over to our servers as well, too. And I don't need to point out to the mayor why that's going on. In fact, with NOAA being part of the Department of Commerce, even at NOAA, the words climate are starting to be removed from their mission. So nationwide, we are...
How do you remove climate from NOAA's mission?
I don't know, but I'm not wise enough to be able to ask those questions. But the leadership at the municipal level becomes very important. And thank you for supporting as mayors and some of the progressive states for understanding the importance of this as well, too. So it's not only sites like this, but also the National Climate Assessment is moving over. So I'm happy to say I'm writing one of the chapters for the new National Climate Assessment through the support of the group of mayors, the state of New York, and the American Meteorological Society. Well, here's where we're working. So you can see that West Palm Beach is one of the projects we're most proud of. We've just finished this work for the Triangle cities of North Carolina. That's Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, and Cary. I come from the city of Asheville. One reason we're located there, that's also the nation's center of climate and weather data. So if you need to access any climate and weather data nationally or internationally, the nation's repository and the scientists that look after all that information is located in Asheville. My center was formed to be able to get that data out of the government's hands into the commercial sector and then create jobs around that as well too. You can see that, you know, we've worked many years with Broward County, Fort Lauderdale, Dr. Gerardo there, and other states and cities across the Southeast. Well, let's talk about what the problem is. The problem is a combination of things that you face daily, urban growth, right? How do you plan for where your growth is, and how do you do that intelligently? But you pair that with the second graph, and the second graph is billion-dollar disasters. And I think you can see the shape of that curve. That curve is not all over the place. It's definitely heading up. And you can see then what is also happening is there's a shortfall of federal funding. Federal funding is only covering about 30 to 35% of the impact of those billion-dollar disasters. And the private insurance sector is only covering another 30 to 35%. Well, then who's left with the remaining 30 to 35%? Well, that would be you as municipalities. And municipalities are definitely getting this. Local governments are saying this is a problem that's not going away. We need to be able to address it proactively. And also then groups like Moody's, who underwrites your bond ratings, are also now coming directly to you and saying, if you want to keep your AAA bond rating so that you can borrow money at the best rate, you need to show us that you're working on resilience, because otherwise you're a greater risk, and you know, we can't lend that money to you because that's a greater risk to us as well too. So this is changing from a conversation between scientists to a conversation that's being led by leaders like you and your chief financial officers, because it is impacting your bottom line. Well, what is resilience? Pretty simple curve, but if you look at time moving across the bottom and the capacity of your city, or why is it that people like to live and work here, that you establish a baseline, and that when a hazard occurs, it drops you below that baseline. And if you're in a situation like Katrina or more recently Houston, you know, you drop very far off that baseline, and it takes a long time to get back up to that level that you want to be looking at. What resilience is all about is investing now for a better future. And this green triangle is about this resilience assessment, and then looking at options it's creating for you, realizing that you don't have unlimited funds, that you need to be using your dollars wisely, and you need to be balancing those dollars in line with your comp plan, your sustainability plan, and your emergency management plan. This is not giving you another plan. Resilience hooks into every three of those and fits into the way your city staff works with this as well too. But if you invest wisely, then when those hazards occur, because they're going to occur, we can't stop the hazard. But you don't drop as far down, and you bounce back quicker. And so resilience is all about investing so that you can bounce back quicker, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is threefold. That within the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit, there is a risk analysis framework called the Steps to Resilience. That's the exact set of steps that we're working with you as a city through. We have completed the first step, and we're in the middle of the second step. That's what I'm here today to be working with your city staff in the afternoon for looking at the vulnerability and risk assessment. What this is doing is giving you then the middle key part of this, and that's a quantified assessment. Quantification becomes important because then you really can compare one thing to another to be making wise choices about where you're spending your money. It's not like, oh, I think the seawall might be more important to us than maybe an improvement to the stormwater system, or actually working to, you know, fix this one critical intersection. Those things are prioritized and they're quantified, because it's the third part that is really critical, and this is coming up with implementable options. What are things that are going to work within your city with the funds that you have available and that your citizens will support? All three pieces are critical for this sort of things. So I'd like to talk about, what some of the main points are following the exposure assessment. Now, this is a map of South Florida, and hopefully from across the room you can see some of the different colors, but the color in green is looking at 3 to 6 feet of elevation. And then if you're looking at the yellow, that is going from 6 to 12 feet, and then the tan is from 12 to 20 feet. West Palm Beach is in the box at the top, and then the inset map is showing you in detail. What you can see is you have a higher average elevation, much higher, than your neighbors to the south. You also are not seeing very much green. And you can see for Broward County and Dade County, you also have these green lines that are cutting across that coastal ridge. Those are those rivers that are sitting through there as well, too. Well, for the same reason that the early railroad came in and set up your community is now a real benefit for you as well, too. And is probably going to be driving your growth as people look to be maybe migrating from the southern two counties into your county and city. So when you start then looking at this, that a big point is this inundation or flooding from sea level rise and storm surge, as Penny said, is still important, but it's more limited compared to your southern neighbors. And this is what the South Florida Regional Compact is showing you as well, too. However, these heavy precipitation events, which is driving these rainfall-induced flooding, which is the studies that you're investing in right now through collective water and your stormwater plan, this is your main challenge. And the impact not only includes the properties it's impacting, but also how you get into those properties, right? If a business does not have access to it due to a flooded street, then it cannot be in business during that time as well, too. So it's just not the location of the business, but access to it, especially true for emergency response as well, too, medical facilities. But when you start then looking at this across here, it's also for, your citizens' residences, because people, when they want to be looking at things that they value, ask 3 or 4 main questions. Where do I live? Where do I work? Here in South Florida, where do I play? And how do I get between those? And so this is assessment, looks at those. So we also know that for your city that there's some socioeconomic strengths, but there's also some challenges. You've got a broad range of economic disparity across your city, which sets up social vulnerability, which is integrated in this as well, too. And finally, resilience is just as much about regional planning. Why is it that you're planning with the compact across here? That transportation issues, a lot of the people that work in your city during the day do not live in your city. They commute in. You have to be looking at those issues, too. And it's planning for opportunity. Resilience is not a conversation just about threats. It's also about how do you plan for your economic vitality and to keep it strong today, because resilience is about investing today for what's good today as well as that future. So let's take a look at what we're doing. Number one, congratulations for the investment you've already made. You've got a world-class GIS system. GIS is the mapping, it's the geographic information system. We're tying directly into that, integrating into that system, and then giving the information right back into that system. That allows us then, and you can see this is a map of where your commercial parcels and buildings are. The inset map on the far side shows individual structures and parcels. That's the detail we're going down. We're saying every parcel, every building. But then we're rolling it up to a neighborhood level. And so if you look across your city, the darker colors of yellow are actually where more of your commercial activity is going on. You can look at your city for, where is that actually happening? As I said, then we go ahead and integrate the threat information. This is the investment you're making right now through an engineering company here, Collective Water Resources. They're putting out an excellent flood model. We're using that investment to make sure that this is as up-to-date and accurate as possible. Remember the importance of quantification. And you can see then from their maps that this is much, much, much better than your FEMA flood maps that are coming from the federal side. So again, you know, wise choice for investing in this sort of information. Because then when you start looking at the combination of that key asset of commercial property and that threat for rainfall-induced flooding, what properties are most exposed in your city? That if you're having to prioritize, what do you need to start paying attention to right now to be able to keep your businesses vibrant? And that's what we're looking at through here. And for the workshop this afternoon, then we're starting to move from just not where things are exposed, but moving from the idea of vulnerability. And so you can see on this map sitting through here that the blue areas are floods, the gray areas are showing where you're exposed to flooding. But the other map on the other side starts coloring in those areas in darker shades of red, because even though 3 of these buildings are equally exposed to flooding, which of these 3 houses would you prefer to own during a flood? Equally exposed, but very different vulnerability, right? Because this one with most of the activity going on above the garage, or that one that's been built up above a certain flood elevation, much less vulnerable to the flooding than the one in the middle. So this is what the analysis is doing. And if you look then at what we're working with, we've now moved from exposure to the idea of, okay, what areas within the city have a higher vulnerability and risk. Notice that this is labeled draft right now. This is what we're working with your city staff on, is to establish the best rule sets to be able to make those maps as most accurate as possible. But again, you can start saying in some of these neighborhoods that if you're getting into the highest ranking, you've got anywhere from 9 to 49 commercial properties in that area that have some higher vulnerability. Well, I talked about the third most important part about this, though, is moving toward implementable options. We don't want to be talking about the problem, we want to be looking at the solution. And we want to be looking at affordable solutions that fit into the direction that you're going right now. This is why we're working in an integrated process with your staff and other consultants. The assessment is designed so that it fits right into your planning framework, and it instantly upgrades as you get those upgrades to your other studies. And it yields easily communicated options that each of you can go out to your citizens, business leaders, and communicate what everybody needs to be doing, working together to be, building this resilience together. Because remember, resilience is about this wise investment, this green triangle. So what's the range of options that's on the plate? Well, we're looking at engineering projects. These are things that you're already investing in right now. And which of those are the best ones to be doing first, second, and third? Stormwater system upgrades, the seawall improvements, tidal valves, road redesign improvement. Where do you need to keep investing for some additional data? Just like you've invested in the flood work with Collective, some of the other new surveying that you've done, some of the studies that you're doing out at Grassy Waters. You also need to be putting together the communication plans. How do you get this out to the right people to be, knowing why you're investing in those and getting them on board? Obviously, integration into optimal economic development locations. That this is something that's coming out, especially here in South Florida. People, as they're beginning to want to locate new business locations, really want to know, have you done your homework? Where's a good place for me to be able to build? You've got the information to be able to attracting those new businesses sitting through here. Updating your ordinances and policies, which you're already very proactive on. And then, as we've talked about, this regional responsibility and partnerships and building those. Well, how do we know these investments are worthwhile? I'd just like to close with telling you a little story. I live in Asheville. Hopefully some of you have visited our fair city and have
It's a beautiful city.
Visited the Biltmore Estate. 2004 floods.
Right.
If you've visited the Biltmore Estate, that's the entrance to Biltmore. Okay? Same sort of story that you have here with these heavy precipitation events that are increasing, but heavy precipitation events caused these 2004 floods, and we had a $200 million impact. $100 million of that was due to business interruption. Okay? How wet was your May here?
Very.
Yeah. We had a record wet May in Asheville as well, too. This is becoming the trend that we're all going to have to get used to, is increasing records. We had the same amount of precipitation in Asheville in 2004. The area outside Biltmore Estate, Biltmore Village, one of our prime tourism locations, again experienced flooding, but not nearly as severe and for not nearly as long. Just met with the business owners in Biltmore Village last week. $200 million in 2004. Looks like the number's going to come in a little under $2 million in 2018. What made the difference? There's a collection of actions and projects to build resilience that we as a city have been working on since the last floods, and they're paying off. Investing in resilience makes a difference for today and the future.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. What happened to Ellicott City?
Ellicott City decided to kind of keep business as usual. And also their view of risk was, well, we had a 1 in 100 year flood recently. We probably don't need to worry about that for another 100 years. Well, at least in Asheville, that using the terms 1 in 100 is not the right way to be looking at it. It's a 1% chance. But unfortunately, in the past 100 years, we've had those types of floods about every 20 years. Okay? This is the new reality that, especially here in the Southeast, we're facing, that this increasing frequency and severity of heavy precipitation events means that the old way we look at floods is not the new way we need to. And unfortunately, Ellicott City, made some improper or incorrect guesses about what their risk profile should look like. I think they're asking some very different questions today.
Yeah, I hope so.
But, I mean, that's a beautiful section of Ellicott. It's historically relevant.
Oh, yeah, it's a great city.
So these aren't easy decisions, but they are decisions that each of our cities, will need to be facing about how they work from that point.
Okay, we do have some questions. Commissioner James?
Thank you, Mayor. And Mr. Fox, that was a very fine presentation. I appreciate it. And this is maybe more for staff and the mayor. So as we start coming up with a plan for West Palm Beach, how do we prioritize areas? Is it simply, well, no, I'm not going to even guess. So what factors enter into the prioritization of where projects are implemented?
So maybe I could just give you a best example of the cities that we've just worked through the prioritization process. So this is Raleigh, Durham, Chapel Hill, Cary. It's an area of about 2 million people. But you first look at cost benefit of your investment. Invest your money wisely. It's not just what your local engineers are going to tell you, but if you want federal support through the U.S. Army Corps or those, you have to have something like a 2-to-1 cost-benefit ratio. Number 2 is looking at, is it just? Is it fair? Is it investing, where it makes the most sense? There's some areas of your city, just like in Raleigh and Durham, that you're going to be able to ask the local business owners and residence owners to join you. They have more resources to be able to do that. You're seeing this in Houston. But you compare Houston to New Orleans post-Katrina, that the socially vulnerable populations of Katrina did not have those resources. There's some areas of your city that you're going to have to look at this too, is looking at the social vulnerability and where can you expect people to join with you as key stakeholders, where do you have to help people? Because those people in those neighborhoods are willing to accept the responsibility, but a lot of times they just don't have the resources.
Patty, did you want to add to that?
Absolutely. Equity is always a big issue, and certainly as we see the risks, the threats, and how they're combined. What we hope to do is have a presentation for you that's going to give you the facts that Jim has explained, and then that will help you and guide you in making those hard choices sometimes. So we'll give you the facts. You guys get to make the decisions, you know.
And that's part of why we engaged in this, so that we could have a better understanding about how to make these decisions about where to put our money and you know, where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. The other thing is that all of the projects that are moving forward have to have a sustainability resilience component, so they have to build that into the projects as well.
That's right. That's the third metric, and again, it's why the sustainability directors are so critical in linking this across your city staff. It was actually the group of sustainability directors across 7 different jurisdictions there in the Triangle that banded together to say we need to be looking at this regionally. So that's the piece. But probably what's most important for those of you at the table to note too is the fourth metric is, you know, financially and politically feasible options. There might be some really great ideas that would have a great bottom line, but they may be very expensive, or they may not be politically palatable for all the stakeholders involved. And that's just the reality we all work in, that those sorts of options have to be compared in that metric as well too. So that's how other communities are prioritizing. We have a technique that we work with cities, and we're going to be working with as soon as the assessment's done to be going through that exercise with your city staff as well too.
Commissioner Lambert?
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you so much. I'm curious as to the timeline of this whole process, and then once we get the plan, how often or what's the process for revisiting it, making sure that we're adhering to it?
Yeah. So it's actually going to be going very rapidly through the summer now. That with the point we're at, we're asking for what we call rule sets for each of your assets. In other words, different types of ordinances or building codes. We've got all this into a digital form, and we're partnering with West Palm Beach on the piece of software that actually keeps this up to date. So it's why it's critical this ties into your own GIS, that as your property records are updating or as you're investing in a new threat assessment, those will go into this and this will stay live. It will update, look at those parcels, be able to do those pieces as well too. So you're investing in the foundation right now, then your city staff keeps this up to date. And that becomes a critical part because you're investing in building resilience, right? As you're investing in your stormwater or repairing a seawall, you want to be able to see the results of that. And you want to know then, okay, now that I've done that, what do I need to do next? And this is a technique that you'll hear your southern neighbors talk about, adaptation pathways. Because as you invest now, it changes your view of the future. And it's step by step. And that's the advantage of doing it this way, is you can keep this live to be making sure your investments are keeping up with the reality of things are changing. Because we're making assumptions about how things like sea level rise are going to be changing in the future. None of us can see perfectly into the future. Sure. There's a range there. We need to stay, with, and the new information coming there will guide your future investments as well, too.
Commissioner Ryan?
I just wanted to add, that the key really to this whole assessment is using it. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but we all are very busy. We've got those deadlines in mind. It's easy to check a box off, but we're trying to set this up so that it is updating. The key is going to be having all of our departments check in and really using it. And then one other little thing, which isn't a little thing, but it's also going to tell us not just some of our our asset threats as far as physical buildings or structures, but our people assets. So we need to think about if our temperatures are going up into the 90s for a longer period of time, or if we're experiencing droughts and downpours, maybe the productivity that we're expecting is going to change. So we can factor that into how long it's going to take to do a project, what that project is going to cost, and how many people we might need.
And I have to tell you that our sustainability office has a history of planning their work and working their plan. We are focused on getting things accomplished, and we have goals, and they're working on those goals every day. Commissioner Ryan had a question, then I'm going to come back to you. Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you. And yes, to follow up on that, we have been doing this for as long as I've been around, very, very well, and staying focused. But you mentioned that the regional impacts are very important. So maybe this is a question for Penny. How are we doing in the region? Are we working with either the county or the municipalities to try to, build off of each other's projects?
Well, as a matter of fact, of course, the Southeast Florida Regional Climate Compact, I'm the city's representative for Palm Beach County, and I hate to call her out, but I'm going to get Megan Houston to raise her hand back there. She is the new Palm Beach County Resilience Director, and then Rebecca Harvey, who is with Boynton Beach, is here as well. I had invited them to hear this presentation and to sit in on our workshop this afternoon if they can make it. So we really are looking collaboratively at sharing information and seeing how we can leverage our resources together.
Great, thanks.
Mr. Kelly?
Yeah, to put some real-life examples of why this is so important, we did the Stormwater Master Plan. Those were some pretty obvious projects that needed to be done because they were habitual flooding that we needed to take care of. But then how do you address the next round of this? We've done a few tide gates, which are going to prevent the backflow during high tide events. But then long term, some of these, as sea level rises, what do you do with that? Do you end up putting more of those, and then at some point, do you pump? Do you have to pump? Because you've got standing water too long, standing in a place because you have more and more of these events occurring. I mean, you compare that against, hardening. Some areas you may need to retreat. Further south of here, they're having to face that right now. Thank goodness we're not in the condition of the other areas of South Florida, because they're looking at abandoning areas because there's just no answer to being able to have homes and businesses in those areas. So these are all decisions that we're going to have to make, and that's why I'm really excited about the tool we have, because we can do comparative analysis and try to plot out what the future holds.
Well, and I think we have another good example, and that is our water system. Back in 2011, we had the 500-year drought, and, we were, really in bad shape in terms of water. But since then, we've had similar drought conditions, and because of the actions we've taken to be able to respond to that, we haven't had a problem. And right now, having a surface water system is a good thing because those folks who are going down the aquifer are going to be experiencing saltwater intrusion. So, we have experience building a resilient city.
Yes, your surface water is such a great asset. It gives you more options than some of your neighbors. Obviously, you've got a few other challenges with things like algal blooms and how you handle those, but you have a baseline option for your drinking water that your sister cities to the south don't have, and so that's something you really need to
I can remember
rejoice
people
in.
in 2011 coming to me and saying, you have to change the water system, you have to change the water system. So glad we didn't back then.
And-
Commissioner
Oh,
Shaw?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Thank you. And to piggyback off of your comments, I actually had this conversation on the Brightline train yesterday with some folks that were coming up from Key Biscayne who were telling me that they've already installed pumps. So it brought about the question for me, as we're looking where we're going to spend our infrastructure dollars, how do we best determine what is the long-term solution? Obviously, like you're saying, no one has a crystal ball, but when you're pumping water, you're basically sweeping a puddle, right? So it's going to keep coming back in. So how are we really trying to direct those dollars into the projects that are going to make the most impact long-term, and how is that determined?
Yeah, I would say, it takes a team of people to answer that question. We'll be able to take the resilience assessment, working with city staff, but again, working with other, engineering firms that you partner with. I've mentioned Collective. We partner with other engineering firms in South Florida that are looking at this. I mean, Fort Lauderdale, we're doing a large study with. Their choices are not as broad as what you have. But I think you have to look at, the vibrancy of today balanced with the vibrancy of the future with uncertainty on top of it. And, just like was being said here, you're investing for today as well as tomorrow. And some of your investments, especially for stormwater, become really critical because that's a little bit probably a larger risk that you're facing, this rainfall-induced flooding. And so already some of those things are coming out. But it's going to be this iterative process that you're going to keep hearing about over the next several months for this partnership. But I think you're going to be looking more at the things that you're already talking about for solutions rather than having to look at some of the stuff that Key Biscayne is looking at right now.
To follow up, so we're basically looking at a short-term and a long-term plan.
So I think, you always have the option if you anticipate, let's just say flooding is going to be at a certain level, you could build and set your ordinances to the top of that expectation today. But it may not happen. So you also could say, okay, we're going to set our ordinances or our building to a level that we see, I'll just pick a number, by 2030. And then as we become more aware and actually see those results, you can see whether is that going to be enough. Or let's say that we may not be able to build to the level today that could be needed, but we can build in a way that we could add on to or change. So we don't want to put electrical rooms on bottom floors anymore, or we want to have the infrastructure in the building to move some things around. So there's some things we can do that are a little bit more cost effective today that is definitely preparing, but we're not overdoing it for something that we're not sure yet of when it's going to happen.
Okay. Commissioner James?
Thank you, Mayor. I seem to recall one of the slides showing either communication with stakeholders or whatever. My question is, I presume as part of this process, there will be an outreach to the business community as well as residents in some of those socially vulnerable areas. And I was just curious how that process will play out, just to ensure that everyone is at the table, has an opportunity to be at the table.
Well, to begin with, that's a process that we're going to come back to you for to see what is it that you want to have public facing and what is just an internal facing for the time being. For example, we may show some vulnerabilities, but if you don't have all of the background, you may see a vulnerability map and really overreact when that's not really what it's meant to tell you. So there'll be steps as we go developing this that we'll be sharing both, internally and then again with y'all's guidance to the community. And then we definitely will, once we have a more solid plan, because we're still in the planning parts now, develop an outreach program.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Fox. Welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Penny, thank you. A very well done presentation. We look forward to continuing our work together.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time today.
We're now going on, excuse me, on to item number 2, Palm Beach County Facilities Master Plan. We have with us today Audrey Wolf, who's the Director of Palm Beach County Facilities Development and Operation. Ms. Wolf, if you'd like to go to the podium.
Good morning, everyone.
Be sure to speak right into the mic, because otherwise we really can't hear you.
Okay, I will try.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Audrey Wolf. I'm the Director of Facilities Development and Operations for Palm Beach County. I'm here today representing Virginia Baker, the County Administrator, as well as the Board of County Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to come here today and talk to you about some of our concerns. My approach this morning is going to be to summarize about 30 years of joint planning initiatives. It should take me just less than 20 minutes, and we're going to cover those decades and then identify how we got to the workshop today. 3 specific actions are going to be requested along the way to protect the county's Block D property, the developability of it, the success of the convention center, and the operation of our community service building and state buildings, as well as maintain other important public facilities in the downtown. As you may know, the county courthouse, jail, and government operations have been located in the downtown since the early 1900s, with expansions to the courthouse and the construction of the government center over time through 1990. With the building boom in the 1980s, there was a need to greatly expand the jail as well as the courthouse. And we had planned to do that on property adjacent to the airport. The city strongly lobbied the county to retain a physical presence in the downtown, to keep Clematis and the core of the downtown thriving by bringing businesses, professionals, employees, and visitors. And as a result, the jail was relocated to Section 6, but the government center remained and the courthouse was constructed in its current location. Shortly thereafter, the city urged the county to buy land at the west end of Clematis for a transit hub to allow for the relocation of the Greyhound bus station from the waterfront into Acre, the west end of Clematis, with a use that would draw pedestrian traffic through the core of the city. In the late 1990s, when the county was looking for sites for the convention center, the city again requested that the county locate the convention center in the city's downtown. While the county conducted an RFP, the city's proposal was ultimately selected based on the commitments and the representations that were made by the city. In the early 2000s, the city focus turned to creating a holistic transit-oriented development district, which encompasses the Government Hill property as well as the Wedge property that currently supports the intermodal transit facility. At each of these key decision points, the county had many options, what could be long-term or permanent public investments, but the city made very compelling arguments and representations of support, which the county took in good faith. Various agreements were executed, and representations were made by the city to secure the county's future. This has resulted in the county becoming anchor businesses in essentially the north, the west, and the south ends of the downtown. Each of these decision points were instrumental in developing the downtown to where it is today. Just imagine if downtown West Palm Beach had not been chosen as the location for the county seat as well as the main courthouse. These past public investments total hundreds of millions of dollars. The county participated in these intergovernmental efforts because it was good public policy for the city as well as the county. The county wasn't expecting more favorable treatment in its future development initiatives, nor were we requesting financial assistance. But we were not expecting that the city would retreat from those representations and commitments in a way that ultimately would cause us financial or operational harm. In some cases, we feel that the county hasn't even been treated the same as private developers and businesses located in the downtown. We just relied on the commitments and the representations and overall vision in a spirit of partnership and as a platform for our respective futures. As time passed, the city's retreat from commitments and changes to codes to spontaneously react to new initiatives has become contrary to past commitments and representations. The cumulative effect undermines the county's ability to fulfill its long-term objectives. We are now at a point where our expansion plans cannot be fulfilled as originally envisioned. The county has previously raised these concerns over incremental city decisions, diminishing our overall development and operational capacity. All of these incremental city decisions would eventually lead, or could eventually lead, to having insufficient square footage to accomplish or to keep the government center and the county seat in the downtown. In 2006, when discussing the TOD district, for instance, the city was emphatic that it wanted to keep the county in the downtown area. However, the combination of development capacity and operating climate continues to erode. Many of the incremental changes cannot be reversed at this point, but it is not too late for further harm to be avoided. I would like to focus on 3 issues that we believe could be addressed by the city. The first issue is the height restriction on the county's Block D. Block D is the land that is surrounded by 3rd and 4th Street, Dixie and Olive, and is currently used as employee and public parking for the government center and the courthouse. At the city's urging, Block D was purchased by the county in 1985 to fulfill the predicted 30 to 50 year expansion needed for the downtown judicial facilities. Believe it or not, it's been over 30 years since that original planning decision was made, and we're willing to move forward, or ready to move forward in the coming years. At the time we purchased the property, there were no height restrictions on Block D. Then in 1997, after being assured that Block D was not in the 5-story height limitation referendum, we discovered after the final hearing that in fact was added to the cap despite no obvious relevance or benefit to the initiative. Since that time, we've continually argued for the height to be raised to that to be consistent with what we have at the courthouse. In 2009, without any coordination with the county, the city initiated an amendment to the downtown master plan that resulted in Block D being permitted to a height of 10 stories and 128 feet. But 128 feet will not provide the development capacity identified by the Judicial Facilities Master Plan. In addition, this left the county's 12-story government center as a non-conforming structure. In 2015, when the city approved the One West Palm project, consisting of 2 30-story towers, the county again raised this as an opportunity to correct the height restrictions on Block D. Shortly thereafter, and as directed by the mayor, we met with staff on several occasions to see how we could restore the height on Block D to accomplish our judicial program needs. While city staff has not objected to the additional height, it has not moved forward. It hasn't moved forward that corrective action, only because we don't have a specific development application in place. However, the city is advancing the OBD initiative at heights upward of 25 stories and 300 feet without any specific development applications being submitted. Making the issue even more puzzling, just recently, city staff has suggested that the county designate the historic courthouse as a landmark through the city code and transfer the property's remaining development rights to Block D. About 2 weeks ago, we learned that the city was going to calculate the transfer rate at 1-to-1 for each square foot built on Block D above the 128 feet, even though the floor area ratio and the number of stories would not be increased under the county's proposal. While the county doesn't necessarily have any plans for the use of those development rights, it is an asset of Palm Beach County. It may be needed in what we hope to be our what will be our long future in West Palm. By the way, the historic courthouse is listed on the National Register of Historic Places and is protected by deed restrictions through the state of Florida. So another layer of regulatory protection really produces no meaningful results. What does seem meaningful is the fact that Block D is flanked by a 21-story Northbridge Center building to the northeast, a 12-story Robert Weissman Government Center to the south, the 11-story Daniel T.K. Courthouse to courthouse to the southwest, and to the northwest by the One West Palm project, which is approved for a pair of 30-story towers at 455 feet, supporting office, hotel, and residential uses. So clearly there is no material harm caused by our modest request for a maximum height of 12 stories and 210 feet for our ownership. We are still expecting to comply We are still expecting to comply with all approval procedures and design-based regulations when a specific design has been developed. We can only question how the city has repeatedly initiated changes to the height restrictions, but can't figure out how to advance our proposal forward. Beyond that, we would see the city as a benefactor of the height as well. With the Class A office space being a desire of the city, we think it's important to recognize the connection between the county's existing downtown judicial facilities and the many law practitioners that actually occupy the Class A office space in the building. We encourage you to support our height initiative as a sound economic development strategy and legitimate public purpose, and to direct your staff to move forward our proposal to increase the height to 12 stories and 210 feet for public buildings in the Quadrille Garden District without the use of TDRs, recognizing the existing buildings as conforming, and allow us to conclude our judicial facilities master plan to accommodate the courthouse expansion in the coming years. The second issue I would like to discuss is the OBD initiative. We believe the OBD initiative has two flaws. The mobility study calls for a new east-west roadway connection at Fern Street across the South Florida Rail Corridor and diverting approximately 25% of the vehicle trips from Okeechobee. While I think we are all in support of diverting 25% of the vehicle trips from Okeechobee to an appropriate alternative route, the Fern Street crossing is unlikely to happen as the SFRTA, who has operational and maintenance control over the railroad corridor, has its own concerns and has documented same in a letter questioning whether that can even be permitted or would allow it to be permitted. If the Fern Street crossing is not ultimately approved, where is that 25% going to go? What impacts will these new projects create without that anticipated 25% diversion? County staff's concern is if the crossing is not ultimately approved by DOT and RTA, all of the city's plans that are based on such crossing will have created expectations of increased developability, and there will be intense pressure to approve the projects without any east-west reliever ever being materializing, or at least being timely implemented. In the alternative, if the Fern Street crossing is approved, there would be a material impact to Palm-Tran operations at the Intermodal Center, especially when combined with the traffic accompanying the Transit Village development. The impact to mass transit in itself seems contrary to the past investment in the Intermodal Center, as well as the mobility study objectives. At the first reading of the OBD, we were happy to hear that city staff recognized the more than 300,000 square feet of Class A office space that has already been approved as part of the Transit Village project. This project has been a longstanding joint initiative of the city and the county to jumpstart the TOD district. Last week, the Board of County Commissioners approved an extension which will allow that project to move forward. The Transit Village project will produce a good portion of that Class A office space that the city so desires. Accessibility and smooth traffic flow are essential elements for the success of the convention center as well. The OBD therefore presents significant operational risk to the county's only convention center. The OBD relies on the mobility study to preserve the long-term circulation of Okeechobee Boulevard, and we don't see how the city can move forward with the OBD before the Fern Street crossing and other mobility initiatives have been fully vetted and tested for their actual operational outcomes. The second flaw with the OBD as currently drafted has to do with the severe limit on parking to serve new development. There is no backup plan should mode shift, transportation demand management, or emerging services and technologies identified in the mobility study fail to deliver the parking spaces that you think it's going to deliver, or to reduce the parking demand that you think it's going to deliver. In which case there would be a lot of pressure on external parking garages or the land that is planned for the convention center expansion itself. Taking that one step further, if the parking cap assumption were to fail, There is no place to mitigate the impacts of the assumption except for the use of the parking garage or the land dedicated to the future expansion. Pressure again would then mount for the county to use those assets in a manner which is inconsistent with the investment, the funding approach, and the success of the convention center. Having a backup plan should be important to the city. As a planner, I'd like to think that the assumptions we use in making these investments and the plans we put in place will not fail. But having been the county's public facilities development program leader for almost 30 years, I know that things can change, and backup plans are needed to ensure the continuity of government operations and that the facilities are flexible enough to absorb those policy course corrections that occur over time. Therefore, due to the mobility study initiatives not having been vetted, implemented, or tested, and the lack of backup planning for the parking, we view the OBD as premature and are requesting that you postpone further discussion on the mobility study or until the mobility study is fully vetted and the DOT traffic model delivered as a tool for informed decision-making. The third and last issue should be easy and is related to the existing surface parking lot between the county's community service building between Avernia and Datura Streets. The county respectfully requests that it be allowed to perform routine maintenance in the form of restriping in its historical configuration without having to stripe the lot to its to current code. Also, the ability...
You don't want to bring it up to code, is what you're saying?
No, we just want to perform maintenance.
No, we just want a parking lot that's not up to code. That's what you're saying.
It does not meet current code, but it meets the code at the time it was constructed, and we just want to repaint the stripes so that you can see them.
Oh my goodness, why would you want to meet our code? What would be our expectation of anybody, any property owner in our city we expect would have their property up to code?
We agree that any time we make a substantial improvement or any improvement that's required by the code to initiate those improvements, we absolutely positive and have been very aggressive in upgrading our facilities on our own and voluntarily. In this case, we are just merely trying to repaint the stripes so people can see them. That's it for the safety of the use of the parking lot. May I continue?
Go right ahead.
Okay. Also, we would like the ability to install access controls if and when warranted, and an approval agreement allowing the county to control and maintain the portion of the alley that divides our holdings.
And you want us to give up our right-of-way as well?
We're not asking you to convey it. We're just asking you for an agreement to formally memorialize that we have been maintaining it all of these years, even though it's your alley, and we would just like the ability to control it so that if and when we have to implement our access controls, we'll be able to use that alley to keep safe flow through our parking lot. We have already agreed to install additional landscaping along Datura side of the property to be responsive to staff needs. The county has historically maintained the portion of the alley that serves our facility, but having that control will assist us in maintaining proper parking, not only for our but also for the visitors for the state that don't have on-site parking. In summary, we would like you to direct your staff to move forward with our proposal to increase height to 12 stories and 210 feet for public buildings in the Quadrille Garden District, and otherwise amend the code so that the buildings are conforming. Postpone further discussion of the OBD until the mobility study is vetted and the DOT traffic model delivered, and allow the county to perform routine maintenance restriping in its historical configuration, install access controls if and when warranted, and approve an agreement allowing the county to control and maintain our portion of the alley. In addition to the three specific requests, I have hoped to shed some light on the important historic role of the county in supporting the growth of the downtown, the impact on county-owned properties and operations by the city's changing planning vision and assumptions, and the need for more effective and timely notice and coordination with the county relative to these and future initiatives. Today's entire presentation was given with the hope that we can improve our historic partnership for the benefit of all of our citizens. Thank you, and if you have any questions, either myself or Russ Herring, our Director of Property Real Estate, are here to answer them.
Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. I'm not clear what you were trying to accomplish, but I did hear you say that you're requesting that we direct staff. I'm not sure you really understand that we have a strong mayor form of government and that I'm the person who directs staff here. And we've had numerous meetings about these 3 issues, and I have directed my staff accordingly. This commission does not direct staff, so I'm not really sure what you hope to accomplish. But I'm sure that the commissioners have some questions, and I'd like to open it up to them. Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Just a couple of points that I'd like to make, and they surround the mobility plan. We have been talking about the mobility plan for a long time. We have tried to bring in both the county and the town of Palm Beach, other stakeholders that would be impacted, have, participate. And at every turn, we have been criticized for having, putting into a plan that has not been vetted. This is intended to start a conversation about all the different things that we need to do in order to meet the future changes in our transit.
And the county staff was on at all the committee stakeholder meetings.
And complained at every public meeting, stood up at the commission and said how it failed in every way and that we should abandon it. We're trying to make plans for the future, and we can't do that without a partnership. And so I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we're having these conversations, but it can't be that when it meets the county's needs, then we're on the right track. We need to find a balance. Diverting 25% of the traffic off of Okeechobee Boulevard, it should be a goal that both parties work towards accomplishing. And then just finally, I understand your issues about Block D, but how do you address the spot zoning issue that would occur by just making that change for this particular parcel? We've been accused of doing that and trying to open up the Okeechobee Business District to create opportunities, no specific project, but to create and address opportunities and address problems and find solutions to these things that the city is trying to address. So I'm sorry that you haven't been able to get the results that you were looking for, but I really want the county and the city to work cooperatively. But it starts with having your people not show up at the commission meeting and criticize us for trying to make changes for our city.
That they were invited to participate in and did participate in. And to then come and criticize a plan that you were a part of developing is a lack of, I don't know what, but it's just totally inappropriate. And to compare Block D to Okeechobee Business District, where we're talking about an extended area, Block D is one small area. And we've said to you over and over again, bring us a project and we'd be happy to consider it. We also gave you an alternative with the TDRs, which you could do today. So, we've taken steps. We also gave you alternatives for the parking lot. That was a compromise. And when we met with Ms. Baker, she was comfortable with those alternatives. So I'm surprised that you're bringing it up again.
We submitted the documents that you requested and have not had a response. They've been over here for approximately a month. So those are over here and we have not heard.
Any other questions?
Would you like me to respond to the Block D question?
I think we're okay with that. So thank you for your presentation. Mr. Green, were there some things that you wanted to? Sure.
Rick Green, Development Services Director. Again, to maybe offer a solution to this, I'm not going to go through this full presentation, but let me just point, that's the Block D in question.
And by the way, this is stuff we have discussed with the county staff.
So under today's code, within
This is not new information to anybody.
No, this under the current downtown master plan, under the Quadro Garden District, you have an FAR of 2.75, a 10-story height limit, as Ms. Wolf mentioned, 128 feet. On Block D itself, with that FAR, they could build about 365,000 square feet. In the correspondence to us, they've indicated they have a desire to build about 300,000 square feet. Now, by designating the historic courthouse, that gives them an additional 308,000 square feet in TDRs. Today's rate right now is between $12 and $15 a square foot. They can sell those. They can even apply an additional 132,000 of those TDRs towards Block D. In addition to the TDRs, you are allowed an additional height of 5 stories. So the 10 stories they have now in the Quadrille Garden District could go to 15. It would be limited to a height of 188. We've heard they might want a little bit more, and certainly there might be justification that if they're doing courthouses, certainly the floor-to-ceiling heights might need to be a little bigger. We could certainly do an amendment in that regard, but we think that what they're asking for could be accommodated through the TDRs. We've talked about the Fern Street extension. Again, most of the trips that come in either off of Okeechobee or Fern Street come toward the central portion into the downtown. Again, there's only been an 11,000, as you heard at a recent meeting, 11,400 new additional trips, which is less than 1% a year. With the Fern Street extension, that diverts 2,540 trips from Banyan Boulevard, and on Okeechobee Boulevard, 8,260 trips, which comprises about 95% of the entire growth over the last 20 years. So it basically would offset any growth on Okeechobee that we've experienced. Again, we have a grid system downtown, certainly with the all-aboard Florida station coming in, that's provided an impact. This is a preliminary design. Certainly, I think it can be designed in such a fashion that it doesn't impact the intermodal transit center. Again, we talked about the objections in the OBD. It's important to note, as we've said throughout this entire process with Planning Board, DAC, and the City Commission, if we did nothing with the OBD, that would result in more traffic on Okeechobee today. The OBD is actually reducing the number of trips. With regard to the backup plan, again, we don't plan for failure. We expect that what we're going to be doing is going to work. Certainly, to reduce the amount of parking, you have to do transportation demand management strategies that are going to reduce vehicular traffic. Again, we talked about the east-west, and then there was a reference to the transit village. So with regard to the convention center, again, there's about 280,000 square feet now. We have planned for that as part of our City Place DRI, where we account for 620,000 square feet. That was all done 25 years ago as part of our TCEA, which I won't get into all that. So, and then with regard to the parking lot that was referenced, again, as the mayor mentioned, it's difficult for us to ask every developer in West Palm Beach to meet our code and then provide an exception. If the estimated cost of something like this is about $22,000, again, with the sale of those TDRs, we think that would more than offset. There's about a $4.6 million bonus that the city would be giving the county with the landmark designation of the historic courthouse that could be used to fund this improvement and many others that they might have. So.
And we did meet with Ms. Baker on this. We went over the plans. We have, we gave them alternatives. Ms. Wolf says she submitted that. Mr. Green, are you aware of what's been submitted for that?
I don't know if a formal application. I don't recall seeing it, Audrey, so I'd have to see exactly what,
so we'll
to who it was submitted to. All
right, good. Any questions for Mr. Green? Commissioner James?
Thank you, Rick. To what degree, and this is on the Fern Street extension, I don't recall the OBD being so reliant upon the Fern Street extension coming into play that without it happening, it undermines the credibility and the viability of the Okeechobee Business District. Did I miss something?
That's correct. I mean, there's a reference to the Fern Street as something that's desirous of the city, but the whole OBD and mobility plan is not contingent.
That's one component of the mobility.
Right, but it's not.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Plus, we've been working very closely with Palm Tran as well on looking at different routes and how to get more coverage in our downtown and what that looks like with our 10 sites. So I think that there are lots of moving parts to this.
Again, there are no links right now. There's 19 intersections on Okeechobee and Lakeview from the bridge to I-95. There are no links at this time that currently are operating at level of service E or F. Again, the desired level of service is D. Every one of those 19 is either A, B, C, or D. And the whole purpose of the mobility study is to create measures such that we will retain those levels of service. Certainly with the addition of Ferd Street, that would reduce the amount of volumes we have on Okeechobee.
I guess I would just like to sort of wrap this up with a statement. And I think it's something that the city administration and the commission have been very committed to being forward-looking and understanding what the city of the future needs to look like, and understanding what the young people who are moving into our city are looking for, and how to build our city for that city of the future. We're not what we were 30 years ago. We're not what we were 20 years ago. And we need to, as a commission and as an administration, really think about our future, just like the presentation before us when we're talking about sustainability and resilience. And what are we going to be like in 2030? What do we want to be like in 2030? And that's why these ideas are coming forward. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to go on item number 3, Commission Office Function. Commissioner Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor. This, obviously, because of our sunshine rules, it's a conversation that we need to have as a commission before any decisions can be made. One of the things that sort of prompted my thinking on this is that when we go through the audit review reports that come out of our audit committee, one of the priorities that the city has asked each department to look at is a succession plan. And we have 2 people in our office that are great, love them. Phyllis has been with the city for a very, very long time, and I shudder to think what would happen to that institutional knowledge if she were no longer there. Our office space, when it was originally planned, is quite large. We could have bowling matches in there if we choose, but so we have. There was at some point a conversation about additional staff or members up in the commission office. But what really drives me is coming from our first presentation where we talked about the community outreach and the ability to stay in touch with the residents in conjunction with what the city is doing. Even though all of the letters and memos and newspapers, we have residents all the time that come and say, I didn't know that. When did that happen? I had no idea that this was happening. And these are part-time jobs for us. And so to stay in communication with our residents, it becomes a little difficult when our staff is focused on administrative functions of the office. So I wanted to present to the commission the opportunity to consider adding an additional staff person to our office to help interact with the residents in responding to letters and emails and phone calls and requests that we send a request to Jeff Green, he sends it to the appropriate department head. By the time the feedback comes, I'm off to something else, and I don't necessarily have the ability to go back and draw from the email or go into a file. So I wanted to present to my fellow commissioners the opportunity to request an additional staff person in the office geared around these functions of both greater outreach and communication with our constituents, and then 2, to help build a succession plan for that office so that as future commissions come on board, they have an idea as to what is expected from each of us. So that was the point of this.
Thank you.
Comments?
Any questions? Commissioner Shelf?
Thank you. And, I think one of the most important things that we do as commissioners is talk to our constituents. I very much value that direct connection, and being new to this position, I understand maybe there's more to come for me. But I think as time goes on, I will still continue to value and make sure that I personally like to handle those things myself. As I was talking to Mr. Green and getting a system together, I myself have created a little database where I log a citizen concern and communicate that back and forth with Mr. Green with a status, and that's a system that works for me. Understanding that I deal with a lot of constituent issues, as I'm sure all of you do, and all of them come over here. So that's 5 people with their issues coming here. From my point of view, if there is a capacity for another resource, I'd like to see it so that it's something that can be utilized on this side to direct back and forth so that we can get answers from staff as appropriate if that's where we're going to dedicate resources. But as far as looking at staff members directly in the commission office to do that particular function, personally, I prefer to do that function myself so that I can maintain that outreach and direct connection with citizens.
Yeah, I don't have any intention of taking away that. It's just to help support that, both with the existing staff, administration staff, and you and all the commissioners. No, I'm not looking to create a wedge in between, just to help support the administrative staff that's there. So, I mean, it's completely up to all of you.
Well, it's not completely up to all.
Well, I mean,
You have, you can decide what you want to do, and ultimately would have to get it into the budget approved, and ultimately I'd have to decide whether to implement it.
I guess, you know, I definitely feel the overwhelming number of emails that are coming in and requests, and I agree with Commissioner Schoaf. I enjoy responding to them and getting back to them, even if it's late at night or on weekends, and I think that they enjoy that as well, hearing from us. I do wonder if we could have maybe discussion on what it is that our current staff are doing so that we can take a look at, is that the most efficient use of their time, and could they help us a little bit more with these requests? I know that even with our calendaring, since we all are a little more technologically savvy, we've implemented some new ways to streamline the calendar invitations, which I think has been really helpful.
That's a good idea. I think, you know, you have 2 full-time equivalents. The question is, how best do you want to use them?
Right.
And to see what is exactly happening now and how that might be different. Mr. James?
Yeah, I guess being the most senior commissioner and having been in this role since 2011, I don't see the need.
You're the old guy, huh?
Yeah. I got all the gray hair to show for it, too. Like Commissioners Schoaf and Lambert, as these requests come in, I tend to take them in, interface with Mr. Green, and then follow up accordingly. I'm not sure what an additional staff person would do to supplement that particular process. So to me, it doesn't make, I don't see the need for it. And you know, I haven't seen numbers to see whether it's even cost justified. But I think it's an excellent idea if that Commissioner Lambert proposed that we have a better understanding, particularly since we have such, we have younger people now,
and a productivity expert.
That are
I have
involved.
A few gray hairs, not quite as many.
That we could better understand what the role of the existing staff is and discuss that and whether that's being used most efficiently. But I don't see the need for adding another staff person at this point.
If I could, I wholeheartedly agree with your thought process, though, about the succession plan. And I think that as one of the newest commissioners coming in, you know, asking questions that maybe one knew but the other one didn't know, I don't know if there was some kind of guidebook or a training for new commissioners. I mean, I'd be happy to help put that together. And actually, all of the commissioners have been really great, and all the staff have been great about, oh, there's this, you know, but I think that there are some things that maybe if we could put into a manual. I was thinking about that with the resiliency plan, and the mayor mentioned, you know, I work in productivity, and that's something that I talk about with my clients all the time, is if you invest now, and it might take us some time to put these plans together or to evaluate what we have, it will pay dividends in the long run.
So just to wrap up, one of the things that could be considered is, you know, bringing in an intern. The current staff doesn't have the ability to put a plan together. I had this conversation with Dorrit Miller last week. You know, that the onboarding process. When new hires come to the city, there's an onboarding process, new city commissioners, and then we're limited to the conversations that we can have with each other. The public requirement, or to have these conversations in public, make it a little difficult to ask Phyllis and Claudia to come and sit down and talk in, the public what it is that they do and how to make it better. So if there's a process that the administration can help put together, that would be great. But most importantly, the reason that came to mind is so that people could talk without necessarily having to have a public meeting. So if we're interacting with staff on
I don't think
things that
there's
are
any way we can do
No,
that.
I mean, if we're interacting with staff,
Yeah.
please don't, assume what I'm saying is to the contrary.
yeah.
What I'm trying to say is that if there is something going on within my constituency, your constituency, and talking to Mr. Green, if there's people in the office that are engaged in trying to further that communication, it's a lot more effective to the residents, not me. I'm fine. I mean, I have the downtown and, 30 neighborhood associations without a gated community to, bring their sources, bring their problems together for a solution. But just in terms of helping the staff that's there.
Yeah, one of the things we can do is really think about what onboarding for new commissioners should look like, because we're going to have more new commissioners in another year, and so we can take that on as administration and get some people working on that for sure. So we'd be happy to do that, and I think the other piece. In terms of sort of parsing out what currently happens in your office, we can help with that if you'd like, or you can move that forward. But I think that would be really helpful as you look at future plans for the office. You might continue to have 2 FTEs, but one of those FTEs might be doing something very different. I was in that commission office for 4 years, and I've talked to people who have been in those positions, and they can manage with 2 people. The question is, are they doing what you want them to do? Right. Commissioner James?
Yeah, and maybe a little clarification on the Sunshine Law, because I had the ethics training. I don't think 2 commissioners are prohibited from talking to each other. It's only they can't talk to each other about issues that might come before the commission.
You can't vote.
So,
Yeah, I can't talk to you about...
Right, but if we're talking about staffing issues internal to the office...
But that...
If you're going to vote on the budget
You're
for
going to
that.
vote on the budget.
Well, no, this in terms of responsibility. I mean, if we're trying to define responsibility
you can do
and what we need for our staff, not funding, not salaries, but identifying, as Commissioner Lambert could probably help us with what the priorities should be. I think we can have those conversations. Am I wrong?
Well, assuming that there is nothing likely to come before you, just like you stated, you're not wrong.
Okay, so if we have a very defined agenda.
I can imagine that the caution that people would give, though, is will those conversations, what's the perception, and will they lead to something that you didn't foresee that somebody brings up that will come before you? That's just a caution, but generally speaking, yeah, I mean, not even generally, the law is that 2 or more commissioners can't meet to discuss items that will foreseeably come before them. That is the law.
Otherwise, our efficiency of the office is severely hampered if we can't have the conversations of internal office operations without fiscal impact discussions.
Right, and I could see you all needing to talk about, Commissioner James gave one of the staff priority assignment, and Commissioner Ryan gave staff a priority assignment, and they don't know who to get to work first. I could see you having to reprioritize that work for your staff without a sunshine violation.
Actually, when I was commissioner, we met, on like the liaisons, committee liaisons. We sat and met. And we met when we talked about operations of the office. So if you're talking about operations of the office, I think...
I agree, and that should, if if your conversation stays with the operational piece, and it's not a piece that's going to come before the commission, it should not be, it's not a violation of the Sunshine Law.
Commissioner Ryan?
Yeah, so just to be clear, because we tried to do that last year, and we were told that we needed to do this, have a public conversation about this. So I just want to make sure that everybody's on board, and we can absolutely have those conversations. I mean, we're discussing commissioner liaison board committee meetings in this forum because we were told we couldn't meet and discuss that out of the public.
You're absolutely required to take a vote on who's
Yeah,
going
you
to be
have
in
to
what
take a vote
position.
on it, so.
And that's something that happens in your board,
And
so that
was
shouldn't
different.
happen.
That was different when I was commissioner. There was no voting on it.
It's a recent addition to
Yeah.
the Code of Ordinances, the liaison position, and how that operates.
Commissioner Schoaf?
Thank you, Mayor. I think Commissioner Ryan has a very valid point when it comes to neighborhood associations, et cetera, because those are things that are likely in some way, shape, or form to come before us, which, you know, Commissioner Ryan being in the Northwest, me being in Coleman Park, and those areas, those issues sometimes bleed together. And I don't know if this is a function for this conversation to say, is there a way under your leadership that helps us create a mechanism to communicate those to one another? You know, I think that point is still really valid to try to make sure that we're all aware of those things. And again, I don't know if that's an internal staffing discussion or if it's just creating a system by which we can communicate that.
Circulating information also,
Is
if it
fine.
just goes out
Don't respond
without
to it.
comments as an information, that's okay. You can't have two people comment on something you receive.
I mean, you can
That's the
send out
problem.
a notice that you're having, to Commissioner Ryan, that you're having a meeting with Coleman Park, and let her know that.
Well, just let me to piggyback off on that, because this is a great example in that you get information, I get information. It's good information to share. You know, coming back from that, composing that, finding the forum in which to share it is, you know, it's difficult. And having somebody within the office that helps coordinate those communications of which it goes out, not this dialogue back and forth, but the fact that, you know, Coleman Park is having, you know, X, Y, and Z that really would benefit historic Northwest neighborhood and the Pleasant City, and how do you bring those teams together? Because I could certainly ask Phyllis and Claudia, but right now, when I see the level of work that they're engaged in, I always bring that back and try to figure out how I can do it on my own.
I think you should also, when you're looking at, look at the job descriptions, because what's the highest administrative level? I always forget.
Executive, I can't remember the name.
Yeah, and look at those job descriptions, because what you're asking for is not outside their job description. Commissioner James?
Well, I think that there are opportunities to exchange that information at the Mayor Commission workshops, and we were often asked, do we want to put something on the agenda? That's an opportunity, and I think that even in our commission comments, there's an opportunity there to share what you may have picked up at some of these things with our fellow commissioners. So I think there are ways to get that information and have that dialogue occur without having a whole nother level of bureaucracy in our own office.
Well, I'm not proposing a level of bureaucracy, and I'm not proposing that we do something different. I'm having a conversation about any input, feedback, you know, that anyone wants to share with respect to our current staff and our future needs. So
Why don't you start by taking a look at what's happening now and mapping that and looking at the job descriptions and looking at what needs you feel aren't being met?
But we did do that last year. And so we're kind of, this is a this is my first turn as the president, but my understanding that this has been a conversation for a number of years. And Commissioner Neering, if he had been here, he would have shared what his efforts were last year. And so I'm just trying to advance the ball and have the conversation. I'm not looking to increase bureaucracy. I'm not looking to increase costs. I'm trying to look at the onboarding, future, and the succession planning for that office.
All right, well, why don't we go on to item number 4, Commissioner?
Right.
Who wants to do what?
Should I just read down the list and see if anybody is in?
Well, do you have some already done, or?
Well, basically what we have at this point is Phyllis had spoken to each of the commissioners, and the ones that were on boards, do you want to stay on the board? Do you want to go on another board? When Commissioner Moffett and Commissioner Materio left, there were some vacancies. And so it's really just to fulfill the function of approving the liaisons to each of the boards. So however you want to do it.
Why don't you go through them?
Art and Public Places, that was Commissioner Materio, and Commissioner Lambert has expressed an interest.
You got it.
Community Redevelopment, the Crab Board in the North End, which makes sense, Commissioner Schoaf. Criminal Justice Advisory Committee, I'm not exactly sure what that committee is, but that was Commissioner Moffett.
That's the CJAC committee that meets at the police department on a regular basis and talks about crime prevention and issues around that. So do you need somebody for that?
Well, nobody seems to be interested in that, so yes.
Well, I would say I'm interested in it. There wasn't a date and time listed for it, so I was just curious on the...
I don't know what the date and time is. We can find that out.
I can look for you and bring it back when you all finally take your vote to formalize your positions, and I'll give you the additional
We don't have
information.
Commissioner Neering here now either.
He
so.
gave us his list.
Oh, okay, so he's all set.
Yeah.
He didn't put
And
CJAC on.
Are we looking to have a commissioner in every single spot? Should these be equally dispersed?
I mean, when I got here, it was just, here's some opening, are you interested in any of them? So the Golf Advisory Committee, I got onto that last year. I am interested in staying on that committee. I think we're making, progress. I'd like to.
If I could just make and I understand you've been serving on that committee, and I appreciate that and respect that. And I just wanted to, for the record, state that I was interested in that committee, but I understand that and appreciate the
Well,
continuity.
and that doesn't prevent a commissioner from going to those meetings.
Okay.
Because they're public meetings and everybody's
great.
welcome.
And as liaison, I don't vote. I just am there to absorb information for the commission, and vice versa. So I don't see any reason why any others can't be there. The Education Advisory Committee, I was on that. I would like to get off of that, and Commissioner Lambert, with your background and experience, has expressed an interest.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The Library Advisory Board.
He said he'd like to get on.
He is unable.
Oh, he wanted to get off the library advisory.
Yeah, he's unable to participate in any of the meetings. And
So that's available.
that's available.
That's a good board. No one?
I mean, again, I'm interested. I want to be careful of overcommitting.
For sure.
The Parks and Rec, Commissioner Neering would like to stay on that. And I am currently the liaison to the Sustainability Committee, and I'd like to stay on that.
Need a motion for those, that's like, city boards and committees?
To this list here.
You need a motion for approval?
You can't do it. We'll do it at the next meeting. We'll formalize. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just making sure they get filled.
Okay, the Florida League of Cities, Commissioner James has been the representative. I assume you
Yeah, I'm still
are
on
interested.
present,
The Transportation Planning Agency, Commissioner James and myself are the full members, and Commissioner Neering is the alternate, and Commissioner Neering has expressed an interest to stay as the alternate. National League of Cities, Commissioner James. The Northwest Neighborhood Salvation Army Committee,
That's yours.
that's my neighborhood. Same thing with the Northwest Community Consortium. The Palm Beach County Criminal Justice Committee, Reentry Task Force, don't know much about that, but that was Commissioner Moffett.
Yeah. That was,
And we'll look at it. She may have been going to them because they're things that she wanted.
Yeah,
She
that's
added.
that's not a,
There's only a few of them that are required by
Yeah, by
code,
co-
and
by
I'll
code.
list those for you at the next meeting so you know which ones they are, and then you all will decide which ones you'll continue to staff, if you will, with the liaison.
I think this board, along with the Criminal Justice Advisory Committee, of which I've attended to, are really important boards. Again, like Commissioner Lambert, I think it's about time commitment and making sure that if we're going to commit to those committees. So I think that would be really useful to know what we need to attend and prioritize those first.
Okay.
Palm Beach County Early Childhood Cabinet, again, another one of those boards that Commissioner Moffett attended.
And again, not a requirement, it's just something that she was.
So any information about it, if any of us want to attend? Palm Beach County League of Cities, Commissioner James. Palm Beach County League of Cities Water Task Force. I'm on that board. It's regional water issues. I'm happy to stay on it. I know that Scott Kelly just rotated off, right? So we don't have anybody from the city following that, so I'm happy to stay on unless anybody's interested in water. And then here is the interesting one. Let me skip that one for a second and go down to the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. Again, Education, Commissioner Lambert.
I'm not even sure if that still exists or.
Right, and I think I had asked for some information on it, so if that could be part of the.
We'll look them up.
Thank you.
The Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, somebody was interested in that. I just wanted to let everyone know that I am an alternate for that board. The permanent member is Wellington. So City of West Palm Beach doesn't have a permanent seat on that, but as an alternate, you attend all of the meetings and are able to vote and participate, unlike the Transportation Planning, and I'd like to stay on that. The West Palm Beach Housing Authority.
I think he said something about that.
Yeah, he says he's willing to let Housing Authority Committee go to Commissioner Lambert or Schoaf, which.
If no one wants it, he'll stay on.
That's an important one.
So keep him on then.
Keep him on, okay. And then the final one, which is the Tourist Development Council, which four very interested people, very interested in that position. So we tried to send it up to the county and let them decide, and they sent it back and said,
Who's
"No,
interested?
You have to decide." So it's all four of us that are here. So my next
They're
recommendation.
having a meeting on the 10th to vote.
No,
They called us recently, want to know who's the representative.
so the other alternative was to put everybody's name in a hat and let the mayor pick. And then it would be the mayor's recommendation.
Well, yeah,
So, I mean, it's a very
we'll do
interesting
that.
board.
I will do that when I go
Okay.
back to the office. I'll put everybody's name in hat and I'll pick.
Good with that?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for getting that done. I know it's not always easy.
Commissioner
Lambert?
Ryan, may I have a copy of your list?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Commissioner Lambert?
And I was just going to ask about next steps. So at our next commission
Bring it
meeting,
to a
we'll
vote.
vote on this?
Yeah, we'll put it all together in a resolution. All
Thank you.
right, anything else on this item? I don't have any additional matters. Anything else that? Thank you all for your help today. I appreciate it.
Oh, hey,
Oh, did you have something you
yeah,
wanted to
just
bring
real
up?
quick.
Go for it,
So
Mr. Green.
we conducted and concluded the internal audit interviews. We took interest from all the commissioners on what their positions were, and I will tell you it's kind of split. So we're going to come back around and talk to you all about it again. So there wasn't a consensus, I guess is the best way to put it.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're adjourned. Thank you.